2 episodes in a row. Oh, and the smoke machine with the green screen looks crazy.
You know, I'm just trying to find the right spell to get at least $10,000 in my bank account. Do you know of any spells that can help with that at all, G?
I don't know. You might have wanted to ask the book guy from Bruce Fest last week. He probably would have known.
Right. Yeah, he probably would have known.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to wait till next time, I guess. Yeah. Anyways, hello. How's it going?
Welcome to Hail to the Deadites. We have a really cool episode today. We have some folks from Lynnvander, who made the Evil Dead 2 board game, here to talk to us about the game and stuff, which is going to be super cool, and inform you guys on it so you can purchase it and stuff. So yeah, I guess we will bring them onto the show. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
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 So welcome to the show. Do you guys want to introduce yourself and tell us what your position at Lynnvander is?
Sure, go ahead, Josh.
Okay. Yeah, I am Josh Dirksen. I am developer, lead graphic designer, and many other hats at Lynnvander Studios. We're a relatively small company. So, Dylan, you can introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Dylan. I'm the lead designer at Lynnvander Studios. I'm the one that I always jokingly introduce myself as the numbers and words guy. So when you read our rule books, I'm the one who wrote it. And I do a lot of the math behind the scenes to try to make the game balanced and fun.
Nice.
Awesome. So yeah, I guess, would you like to give our viewers a brief explanation on the Evil Dead 2 game and sort of how it works, on a basic level? Then we'll go more in depth as the episode goes on.
Sure. So for those who don't know, we just recently finished up a Kickstarter for the Evil Dead 2 board game, which is a deluxe version of a game that we designed a few years ago, also the Evil Dead 2 game. And so it's got lots of miniatures in there. It's got lots of the expansion content was all pulled in. We gave a bunch of things a graphical overhaul. Josh did an amazing job making everything look better and more atmospheric. And then we added a whole bunch of other things like 3D cabin walls, dice bags, special dice that actually have pages of the Necronomicon in them if you really want to push your luck. And then also a very popular or very demanded solo and co-op mode, because the game itself has a trader mechanic in it where you can become a Deadite, or might be a Deadite at the beginning of the game and not realize it. So we added another version to the game where you can say, okay, everybody's human. We know everyone's human. We don't want to worry about someone potentially becoming a Deadite.
Super cool.
So it sounds like you guys have really gone in depth in terms of being intricate and adding a couple fine little details of the game to fit the lore of the universe.
For sure. I would say a lot of what we looked at for the game had to do with how do we really get the theme to come through, because we've worked on a lot of licensed properties at Lynnvander. We've actually been a for-hire design studio for probably about 6 or 7 years, and it's only relatively recently that we're doing more of our own publishing now. Evil Dead 2 on Kickstarter being one of probably actually really our first big licensed property that we are kickstarting and publishing ourselves. But we've done this sort of thing for 25 other titles, I think, at this point, various other big IPs. And I will say, Evil Dead as a franchise has some of the most astute and detail-oriented and hardcore fans in all of IP licensed property that I have encountered.
Don't say.
Yeah. Yeah, everything in your little panel of this stream is 100%. Yep, there you go. Yep, on brand. So we really had to make sure that we were bringing our A game to laying out the game and art direction and gameplay. atmosphere, feel, all of that stuff.
Super cool. So say I have the box of the game sitting in front of me and I open it. What can I expect to find in
This
that
box?
Yeah,
This
that
box
box
back
right
there?
there.
Right there? Yeah.
So I guess for the
I had to find
the-
it for a minute there. I was having trouble.
the deluxe edition, what can I expect to find in
Hey,
the
there it is.
box? And Chris has it right there.
Well, this is, I will admit, this is the earlier iteration, not the
Yeah.
newest version that you guys got. I think this is from the first time you guys did it.
Yeah,
Correct.
so we could talk a little bit about the history of it. Do you want me to tell that story, Dylan?
Yeah.
Sure. So, as I'm sure that you know, there was an Evil Dead 2 Kickstarter for a board game that a lot of people put money into that disappeared and went nowhere.
I was literally going to ask about this.
So we had nothing to do with that one. But it created an interesting opportunity because Jasco Games, who published the version you were just holding up, approached us and about, hey, do you want to do a Heartthrob campaign? And basically the idea was we were going to do a Kickstarter and it was going to have a large limit because of what we were going to do, where we actually donated our design time for creating this game because we really wanted to do right by the fans. And what we did was the goal was really high, but if it was met, everybody who backed the game would get a copy of the game, and every backer of the original game would get a copy of the game. They didn't need to back this Kickstarter to get a copy of the game. It was like basically a way we could be like, hey, we know that, you know, you got the short end of the stick and you didn't get the game that you wanted to. So here you go. And it was a really cool project to be a part of because that was like something that I have a horrible problem of backing board game Kickstarters and have been burned more than a few times. Really? So I was like, oh my gosh, this would be a really cool thing to do. And so that was how the first, the Jasco version got made. Now they did a small print run, and every convention we go to, we always have people coming up to us saying, hey, I want the Evil Dead 2 board game. I can't find it. I can't get it anywhere, you know, and we're like, it's out of print. We don't know what we can do. And then through a fortuitous series of events, the license came up and we were able to snag it. And we were like, hey, we own the design of the original game that we made, not like the original, but right. And now we have the license. We could clean it up, do some rules clarifications, fix a couple of small things, put everything together in a big box, do a deluxe version because all of the molds for the models already exist. The manufacturer already has those. We're like, we could make a really cool big box version of this and put in the solo and co-op mode, which is something that Lynnvander is really known for, that a lot of people on Board Game Geek have been wanting. We're like, we've got to try this.
Reaction.
Yeah, we got a lot of feedback about that. It was really only possible to do the Heartthrob campaign in the first place because of our existing relationship with the licensor. So at the time, we were not a publisher at all. And Jasco was handling some publication and distribution duties and sales duties for some of our other games that we had done previously. And we also did, we really got working with them on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the board game, back in 2017, I guess it came out. And then they did an expansion for that one, and we did a Cowboy Bebop board game with them. So by the time it was like, you know, talking to the licensor, it was like, hey, it'd be great if we could salvage this, if we could do a Lynnvander Jasco Studio Canal team up to right this wrong, and maybe there's some goodwill in it for us as well. But it seems like it would be a really cool thing. And the licensor said, hey, yeah, we're pretty sure the other project is never happening at this point. We're really embarrassed and upset about it. If you guys want to take it on, power to you. So when the previous game fulfilled, I don't think they manufactured very many extra. Like usually when you do a big Kickstarter like that, you'll print a few thousand extra copies to sell into retail. I think they probably didn't even have that many to put into retail. So it was available, but only for the briefest of times. And I think what was available in retail sold out pretty quickly. And then we didn't even have... There was an extras pack that had some leftover miniatures and a few extra odds and ends that were just cool to have, that we were like, hey, we could do that on the Kickstarter. That was, yes, that little box. That little box is even harder to find. They printed even fewer of those. They were mostly for Kickstarter fulfillment. So there's a lot of really cool replayability in that box. That's kind of a shame it's not in the base game, bosses and what have you. So this is part of why we were like, hey, let's get it all together into one package. And then, of course, because we had this goodwill with the licensor from doing it the first time around, it was a pretty easy ask to say, hey, could we reprint it? Would you give us the license to reprint it? It was a very easy yes for them, I think. And they've been great to work with.
So were you guys like fans of like Evil Dead and like horror stuff before you got the game? Was this like a fan dream come true to work on like an officially licensed product?
I mean, at least
first, then I'll
I was like, at least for me and my friends, we could quote probably all of Army of Darkness and probably have back and forth, which like a lot of people, I'm sure, was my first introduction to Evil Dead. And then I went back and watched Evil Dead 2 and then watched the original Evil Dead. So I like watched them in reverse order.
You went back in time, kind of like how Ash did.
Exactly. But yeah, I've been I'm a pretty big fan of the series, and it's just like it was really cool to jump into it because it's just the amount of quotes that come from the Evil Dead IP in my daily life is significant.
I could totally resonate with that.
I didn't actually know that you were so familiar with the IP when we kicked this off. I knew nothing about it. I'm not really a horror fan. For me, most IPs that come across my radar, if they're like anime shows or if they're movies, a lot of them come across my radar because it's a licensed property I've heard of that's relatively famous, but I've never seen it or know anything about it. So I come to it generally fresh most of the time and then do a really deep dive on research to then become an instant subject matter expert so that we can actually work on the project and do right by the fans. And so far that seems to be working out okay. We get a lot of really good compliments about some of our other games just because they are so true to the source material.
Nice.
And I mean,
even if
something
we didn't start as fans.
I was going to say something that I'd like to share if you give me a second, because I think it's a very interesting story. What I love to tell people about in terms of the attention to detail on the board, like while I was a fan, Josh knows Evil Dead 2 far better than I do right now, because he told me at one point that on the game board, he was going frame by frame in the movie so that he could make sure that the correct doilies were on the nightstand table, because he wanted to make sure that fans wouldn't look at it and say, that's not right.
You know what? I appreciate that, because there are fanboys
and the correct cross stitches in the frames on the walls, even though those walls on the game board are drawn in perspective, so you see them like this and not flat, because it's a aerial view of the cabin, and there are some very limited like 3D perspective effects happening on the walls. But where those appear, yes, the correct paintings and cross stitches and everything that are in the cabin are on the right walls in the right place. It's a little bit tricky, actually, doing the level of detail research I did for the cabin. You actually quickly spot continuity problems with the film. They're not perfect by any means. There are definitely, well, there's two different cabin sets, right? Yeah, here it is. Here's the Chris has got the other board. I think his the
green screen.
Greening
out the cabin.
The green screen's hiding it.
What about now?
We're just looking at the cabin picture, not the
Dang.
cabin board.
All right, here. I'm not using a green screen. I will grab my copy. I'll just show you this corner for starters, but like, you know, full on illustration of everything that is in that room. Everything on the desk is just so. We've got the home sweet home cross stitch on that side, beside the chair in front of the door, like those levels of detail. It's the other really good one. Even down to like some of the books and stuff that are like the right shape, like the room with the piano. There's a cane resting against the nightstand and like all that stuff. So yeah, an awful lot of flipping back and forth through the movie, just figuring out, making a list of like where all the shots are that feature a given room and where I can look at each individual wall, screen capping them, building a whole set of those just to get like the atmosphere and the colors right. That's also a big deal. Because sometimes like we do some projects where you'll have like a big deck of cards or you'll have a lot of other components and you might not have sort of one central component or focus that everything interacts with. But for a project like Evil Dead, because we've got miniatures that go on this board and we've got tokens that go on this board, the board really became the, to quote a phrase from my restaurateur friend, the money on top. Like, we're going to put the effort and the love in the one thing that everyone's going to spend a lot of time interacting with and looking at. So it makes sense that all the art direction effort and illustration love and care is in that component more than anywhere else in the game, because it's where you're always looking, because it's where you're always moving pieces and doing stuff with, right? My restaurateur friend says, you know, if you're going to make a pizza, you're supposed to put the pepperoni on top of the cheese. You don't want to hide where the money, the expensive ingredients have been put. So he used to tell me money on top, and it stayed with me ever since. I think about it in game presentation all the time.
Do you have like, you mentioned there was like continuity errors you picked out. Do you have like a favorite piece of the cabin, like art that you worked on, or like your favorite like continuity error you caught, or anything like that?
Yeah, well, the walls aren't the same in both cabins. The texture of them and like how they are treated. In one of them, there's slats, and the other there's stucco, depending on where you're looking and which version of that room you get. And actually, the living room is stucco on one half and slats on the other, so it's doubly weird. But I think there's the tracking shot with the very first tracking shot you see with the two people and with the 2x4 and the camera mounted on it that are like that shot. Some of the details in the cabin are different in that shot than they are later in the film. And also, like, the challenge with a game like this is you also have to pick, even though you're seeing different parts of the cabin at different stages of the film, you kind of have to pick one canonical, this is the exact moment in time to do the thing. So, like, you never see the sitting room with the piano from some of the establishing or wide shots before the glass gets broken. From the window in that room, but like on the game board, that room, the glass is intact, so it's kind of like a weird, like, this is right before everything has gone terribly wrong at the cabin. Everything is sort of pristine and correct, but you can't get reference for most of that stuff in the film at that point because the action kicks off right away.
Yeah,
like you don't see the kitchen until much later in the film, even though presumably they had a chance to spend a little bit of time there. Actually, I always wondered about the fact that there's a big pile of dirty dishes in the kitchen.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Like Ash and Ash, they get there right away and they're like hanging out, and then within minutes the Deadites attack. But it's like, okay, there's a lot of dirty dishes stacked in that sink. So I guess the previous occupants just didn't really do the dishes.
The Nobies.
The Nobies, that's right. Thank you.
I just chalk it up to ignoring the recap and just being like, Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead 2 seamlessly going together, and like all those dirty dishes are from, when Ash and Scotty and Cheryl and Linda and Shelly first got there and whatnot. That's how I try to frame it.
That's fun. I like that.
If we were to like take it as like Evil Dead 1 didn't happen and we take it by just the recap at the beginning of Evil Dead 2, then it's like, yeah, why are there so many dishes?
Mhm.
Yeah. So do we want to jump in a bit to like the game itself, like mechanics of it? Is that cool? And stuff?
It's up to you. It's your show.
Yeah, I mean I'm someone that when I'm playing a board game, like the rules are told to me and they go right over my head. So
Or they do this.
I would love to hear about the game mechanics before I'm actually playing it. So I just thought that'd be cool for our listeners to hear sort of how it works and stuff. I know you guys have the video up of like the co-op thing.
Yep.
So we have a co-op playthrough up, I believe.
I watched it today, so
okay, cool. I don't remember what's up and what's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some existing plays for the Hidden Trader 3 to 6 player version of the game. We put up the co-op video on the Kickstarter because it was brand new. But it's good that you have Dylan here because he is usually the one who teaches most of our games and or records our how to play videos. So you're in good hands to be taught the game.
Cool.
So the game itself, the way that it works, like, and I'm going to skip over like setup and everything because we have a very, very detailed, written by somebody who has OCPD, season of steps of how to set the game up and make sure that it's all organized. But the core thing that you need to understand the mechanics is that, you have a figure that's on the board that represents you, and all of the items are randomly scattered on the board face down, so you don't know which ones are where. Your goal of the game is to get, and there we have a nice, nice Ash Mini. The goal of the game is that if you are human, and I'll explain the regular version first and then explain how the co-op works. So if you are human, your goal is to find pieces of the Necronomicon and close the portal that's summoning Deadites. If you do that before time runs out, you win the game. Now, if you are or become a Deadite, your goal is to find pages of the Necronomicon and use them to open the portal before time runs out. So either way, you are trying to find pages and then bring them to the portal and use them to either open or close the portal. The board has a tracker at the top where the humans start on one side and the Deadites start on the other. And basically you put the page tokens on that tracker until you get to the center. And then whoever gets to the center first wins the game. Now, the one other important thing during setup to be aware of is everyone gets what is called a corruption card. Now, the corruption card tells you whether you're human or Deadite, but you are not allowed to look at it. So you don't even know at the beginning of the game whether or not you are a Deadite, let alone whether or not anybody else is. Cool. So it's a little bit different that way. We always try to figure out how can we make our games a little bit different. Now, what you're going to do is that we go around the table taking turns. So if like the four of us are playing, let's say that I'm first player, so I'll take my turn and then I'll just rotate around clockwise until everybody gets a turn. And then the bad guys, the Deadites, will react. Before I take my first turn, we draw an event card. We do whatever it says. It'll spawn some Deadites on the board. And then depending on number of players, I usually have 2 or 3 actions that I take. Then it goes to the next player all the way around till we're all done. Then all of the Deadites are going to move, and they move 1 space towards the closest person. They're not very smart, though. So if there's like a boarded up window in the way, they'll claw at the boarded up window rather than going around. If that's the shortest path. So there are ways that you can deal and manipulate with them. But then they will all move. And then after they all move, they all attack. And when they attack everyone who's in their space. So if all 4 of us are in the same space and there's a Deadite in there, it actually attacks all 4 of us. We don't pick who it attacks.
Okay.
And that's the general layout of the game. Now, on your turn, the actions that you can take the same action multiple times. There's things like move, where you move from one area to the next. You can move a total number of areas based on your move rating. You can search through any of the item tiles that are on your space. You basically pick them up, take one, put it on your card, and put the rest face down. Now, you can say whatever you want about what's on those tiles, but it's up to you whether or not you're honest. And another action that you can do is you can use pages of the Necronomicon to cast spells. You can also attack other players and attack Deadites. And that's kind of like the laundry list of things that you can do. And then there's like, and I'm not going to go way down into the detail on like how you do all of those individual things. But that's what you're doing, and that's what you're trying to do. Now, the key differences are when you become a Deadite, you now follow the same set of rules, except now all of the Deadites are your allies and the humans are your enemies. So like the Deadites won't attack you and stuff, and they have rules that they stop you if you're running around and there's too many of them. Basically, it's like the old movie thing of like all the zombies in the way and you can't fight your way through, right? So that's in there. But if you become a Deadite, that flips, and now other humans can drag you and stop you, but you can just walk through the Deadites. They don't care. You're one of them. And the way that you get Deadite cards or get corruption cards is that basically every time you use the Necronomicon, there's a chance you get corrupted. Every time you get too close to a Deadite, there's a chance you get corrupted. Every time a Deadite attacks you, there's a chance you get corrupted. And the different characters have different virtue scores, which basically represents the chance that you're going to get corrupted. Like, let's look at Ash. Ash has a great combat score and a horrible virtue score. So he's great at fighting. But there's a chance that he goes bad. If you fail your virtue check, you basically draw these cards, the corruption cards. And if any of them say Deadite, you become a Deadite. You can have like 12 of them. If they all say human, you're still human. So it's an interesting mechanic. And the first time you gain a second one, that's when you can check the card that you have face down.
Okay. So
sorry, I threw a lot at you.
No, yeah, you're fine.
So you said you get a corruption card when you start. Like you start with one,
yes,
that you can't flip it over.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a chance that everyone playing could have a Deadite card?
There is a chance
is that possible?
There's a chance that all of the Deadite cards are in play, but there's never enough for everyone to become a Deadite.
Okay. Cool.
So I think like in a 4-player game, you only use 3. It might be 2. I'd have to look it up in the rules, but
there are 3 total. I think the third one is for 6-player, or it gets seeded down in the deck. Some of them get put into the random shuffle at the start, so they're more likely that you get one in the opening draw. And then the rest are just seeded into a bigger stack for later as you make challenges and whatnot.
Have you guys ever played a match where like only one person was left not being a Deadite and everybody else playing was a Deadite?
Oh yeah, I've seen
I've played where all the Deadite cards have been handed out, but the versions start to run together. I think you always have at least 2 human players.
Okay.
I think.
Cool.
It's possible for one Deadite player to actually draw multiple cards, and then they're actually able to give them away when they attack. You can fight other humans to turn them.
Oh yeah, no, it's a great mechanic because like, let's say I've got 12, and yes, I know I'm biased, but whatever. If you're not going to toot your own horn, who will, right? So you could have 12 corruption cards and only one of them says Deadite, right? But no one knows how many of them say Deadite. We have a mechanic in place where once I'm a Deadite, and you know this, so what happens is one of my Deadite card goes face up, but I've got 11 cards you can't see. Let's say that I attack Chris. Well, if I attack Chris, I get to hand Chris one of my cards face down. And then the question becomes, gee, Josh, do you think I handed a human card and wasted the opportunity to steal an item in order to hand him a card? Or did I hand him a Deadite card and now make him a Deadite? And are you going to believe him when he says, no, it was a human card?
Yeah, the game is all about seeding mistrust among the players, whether or not there's a Deadite. I've actually seen the game played where nobody turns Deadite. It is mathematically possible, and they all still think that there's at least 1 or 2 Deadites in play, so everyone is just incredibly suspicious.
The
For
paranoia.
the entire game and not working together, and then because they're not working together, they get overrun by the regular Deadites and lose.
Wow.
So then the game just wins. And it's like, oh, that didn't really go
That's
so
funny.
good for us. There's a little bit too much suspicion. It's also made harder by the fact that a lot of the special or a lot of the unique, crazy types of things that happen in the movie were made into what we call Deadite bosses, basically. So we've got, I'll show you this mini, it's a fun one. We've got this oversized killer tree mini that can spawn and will drag players around. We've got the deer head on the plaque, which you'd put in the cabin. That will cause grief for the players. There's a few others. And then at some point, if you take too long, you also get the rotten apple head boss mini, which is an enormous head that comes through the door.
Wow.
And even has the little heads on the side.
I
He's
love
got the little
that
heads on the
detail.
side. He's actually a 3-piece miniature where he's got 2 arms as well. So when you lay him out on the game board, camera, he's got 2 little like hands as well. So you've got, busting through the window.
That's cool. I love that.
So those guys actually make the game substantially more difficult than just trying to fend off a horde of nameless Deadites. And depending on which ones are out, they can make the game very challenging.
Okay.
In the cooperative
And of course,
mode,
the
we
hand
actually
is in there.
The hand, yes,
Oh,
the hand is
yeah.
another boss you can find skittering around. In the co-op mode, we actually bias the deck a little bit harder towards spawning more of those bosses as well, which makes the game a little tougher.
I dig
Cool.
the intricate details and whatnot.
So
Sorry,
there's-
You gotta have everything from the movie. Actually, the fun part about it is one of the bosses we got to do was this really imaginative flying
I love
Kandarian
that.
demon.
From the
Because,
end.
there's a couple frames of them right at the end of Evil Dead 2, even though they feature much more heavily in Army of Darkness. Licensing be weird that way. Like, if a thing is in whichever movie, you get to use it, even, no matter how briefly. And
Yeah.
sometimes working on licensed board games is a question of like, well, let's comb through the movie and see every possible minute detail we might be able to pull in and make something significant in the game.
That's awesome.
They give us a little bit of creative freedom as well. For example, like one of the boss enemies is a possessed squirrel.
From the deleted scene.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, because there's a deleted scene where possessed Ash like takes a squirrel and like chews on him and then like throws him to the side or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were able to get that in there, right? Really, really deep cut for those who know the movie really well.
That's
Cool.
awesome.
So you guys
Cute.
mentioned there's a single player mode. So I would love to hear about that and how it like compares to the co-op mode.
Sure. So our big thing, by the way, that I do want to call out is that what we did with our single and co-op mode was to be loyal to fans who currently have the base game. We designed it without any additional components. That way, people who already have the game didn't need the new version to be able to play the solo and co-op mode. They just need the new rules. Now, in solo mode, it is the exact same as co-op mode, except you control 2 heroes instead of 1. So basically, you playing solo would be the same as you and one other person playing co-op in terms of the mechanics.
Okay.
The majority of the mechanics stay the same. You get a number of actions per turn. You do the same things. Enemies can slow you down the same way. So if you're familiar with like all of those rules, they're the exact same. A couple of items are different. You're still also trying to use pages of the Necronomicon to close the portal. The main difference comes with there is a different way that the corruption deck works in solo and co-op. And in solo and co-op, there's instructions on how to assemble the deck and shuffle it. But every time you go to try to close the portal and use a page, you have to flip over cards from the corruption deck. And if any of them say Deadite, it goes on the Deadite side. But if they all say human, it goes on the human side. Now, this deck doesn't actually get shuffled. So after you draw some cards, the cards that you drew are still available. It only shuffles when you flip a Deadite card, which means that mathematically you're eventually going to flip them, and it becomes a bit of push your luck with, because there are ways you can shuffle it back in, but they take time. And so it becomes a bit of push your luck of how far can I go before I'm now risking opening the portal instead of closing the portal.
Mm.
And then everything that was a virtue check in the other game that would give you a corruption card if you failed it, in the solo and co-op mode, if you fail it there, what happens instead is you remove a human card from the deck. And so it becomes more and more likely that you're going to flip over a Deadite card, like, because the deck starts with like so many human cards. You're like, oh, this is fine. And then you start pulling them out as you play, and you're like, this is getting a little dicey.
Yeah, it definitely gets scary at that point. You're just like, well, we have to fight these Deadites to clear a path, but we're going to make some virtue checks and possibly take some hits to our main resource in the process, and then it becomes even harder to win the game.
So where do you guys have more fun playing as, human or like Deadite, when you guys get corrupted and turn Deadite and whatnot? What is more fun for you guys personally, would you say?
That's a tough one.
I would say I have more fun as a Deadite, hands down. I think it's more fun.
You get a whole bunch of additional options as a Deadite, because there are some of the spells in the Necronomicon that you can't cast if you're human. You have to be Deadite to cast them. And you can really use it to turn the screws on the other players and just make their lives miserable, throw more things at them.
Well, I'm also a horrible person and love instilling the paranoia in people by handing out those cards.
Absolutely.
It's great to watch their camaraderie just crumble, but I'm a horrible person.
I had another question. How do I phrase this? It's from when it was originally under the other company with that Kickstarter, and then became you guys's. How much of what was in the original version were you guys able to bring over versus having to add some new original stuff or like tweak certain things due to whatever reasons?
Are you asking about the one that didn't deliver?
Yes.
Yes, like in terms
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, in terms of that version, like what were you able to bring from that to this one, and what did you have to like tweak and change and whatnot? Because legal reasons of that being another company's versus you guys'
right. So the licensor being the ultimate authority here on what we could actually do with the project, meant that they pretty much told us, like, you know, it's got to be an Evil Dead 2 themed game, but we ended up not using anything from the original game. It was a brand new wipe the slate clean, all new art, all new mechanics. Thematically similar. The previous game was going to be about moving around a map that included the cabin because it had miniatures, and it was going to be about collecting items and using them to do things. That's pretty much where the similarity ends.
Okay.
The one thing that was interesting in the process, and part of why we were able to do the Heartthrob campaign at all, just from a business financial perspective, was that the previous company, although they never delivered the game and all of the funding, you know, disappeared, they did, however, invest time in sculpting all of the miniatures and in having the tool steel for them cut in China for plastic injection molding. Now, if you know anything about manufacturing, those are kind of a really, really expensive process to make. Like, they're thousands of dollars of tool plate, and you're talking about a game or project that has probably 40 or 45 unique plastic figures and a total of 70 of them. The fact that they had gone and paid for and had the tool steel cut and all of the miniatures were already approved from the licensor, but there was no game to go with them, was actually part of the reason why it was possible to do the Heartthrob campaign in the first place. Because all that, there's probably $50,000 or $60,000 in tool steel that had been cut for all these miniatures that coincidentally was at the same manufacturer that we had used before.
Oh,
so
wow.
The licensor just said, hey, these guys are now in charge of this project. All that tool steel you're sitting on, they can use, basically.
Wow.
And everyone just kind of had to get on the same page. And it was one of those weird, like, just fortuitous things that it ended up being in the same factory, didn't have to be moved, didn't have to be re-inventoried or repaired. Sometimes when tool steel switches factories, it mysteriously gets damaged. Whether that's deliberate or just because of wear and tear or traveling, who knows? But it is like the one of the primary assets for any given project. Of if we were going to reprint the game, that is exactly the one thing we don't want to pay to have remade.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a double-edged sword, because on the one hand you're like, hey, all the tool steel exists, so it's just a question of plastic injection molding more figures. On the flip side, it's also we're not changing any of those miniatures. So those are the miniatures we're using. We're not going to make more miniatures, because then we have to make more tool steel. And frankly, we did quite a lot with the stuff we had. So I never felt like we were hurting for replayability by the time we merged in that extras pack that had, the gooseneck Henrietta variant and the possessed squirrel, and there's a possessed deer as well. Not just the head, but like a 4-legged deer. All of that stuff was in this extras pack that were, again, also fully sculpted and tool steeled. So we were just like, well, it exists, we might as well do something with it. And that was part of the reason it was possible at all.
Super cool. So we've seen the bosses, or like the bad guys in the game. Can you tell us who we can play as in terms of like human characters and stuff? And if you have the little minifigures, you can show them.
Yeah, I think I've got actually a bunch of them here. I showed you the Ash one briefly earlier. Let's just get him on the white part of the wall there. There you go. So you got Ash. I think this is Annie. Yeah, holding the Kandarian dagger. Yeah. We've got Jake. Somewhere is Jake. He's holding a shotgun. Yeah, we got Bobby Joe. We got Ed. Ed's just making the classic thinker pose. We've got Linda in her like dressing gown. Mine has been a little bit crushed from being in the box without the tray. It's another thing we're fixing in the deluxe edition: a tray to actually put miniatures in, not just have them loose. And yes, of course, Bobby Joe. So the six human cast members from the film are your playable characters, and they've each one has a stat card with some basic abilities, like how far they can move, how well they fight, and critically, what their virtue score is, like we mentioned earlier. I believe, if memory serves, Annie is the only cast member that doesn't turn Deadite in the course of the movie, or doesn't get just killed.
Yeah, pretty much.
So Annie actually has the best virtue score in the game. She can turn bad, but it's really unlikely compared to, say, Ash or Jake.
Cool. So
which
I don't
characters
know.
Oh, sorry. No.
You go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna ask, like, which of the miniatures do you like the most, or in terms of like which character are you more drawn to play as when you play the game?
That's a tough one, because they don't start with specific items. They all basically start empty-handed. So it's really just, which stat line do you like? And my answer, I think, is probably different whether I'm playing co-op or competitive.
Okay.
with whether or not there is a hidden traitor in the game.
Dylan, how about you?
Ash can become quite the combat powerhouse.
Oh,
Jake has the potential to as well. I'm rather partial to Dylan. Do you remember offhand which one is like the move 3 character? Because one of them moves really, really far.
I don't know off the top of my head, but that's the one I always choose because I like to move.
Yeah. Oh, no one's over here. I better go and look at these tokens with no competition.
Yeah.
It's also the one that has the easiest time getting away from Deadites. So if you are playing the co-op game, it's a little bit easier to keep spacing from them and to like bait them all into a cluster and then sort of, get free and run away. I think it's Bobby Joe, but I'm not 100% on that. Might be Ed. But it's definitely not Jake, Ash, or Annie. I don't think it's Linda. So there we are. It's one of those.
I know it's not Ash. I can tell you Ash's
I know it's
stats
not Ash.
off the
That's
top
right.
of my head.
So I don't know how familiar you guys are with the video game, but basically in that, a time portal opens and everyone from every part of the Evil Dead universe all ends up in the cabin together. So if you guys woke up with an email from all the rights holders from the Evil Dead stuff saying you can put any character or Deadite monster in the game, like who are you picking? Who's going to the factory to get made into figurines?
From Evil Dead 1, Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness,
Army of
Darkness,
Ash
the
vs.
TV
Evil
show.
Dead,
I mean, like,
the
I'm
2013
definitely
film
going.
Rise.
But like my first choice, just because of the fact that, as you might be able to tell from the weapons, I'm a bit of a medieval fan. But I'm going with Army of Darkness, the evil Ash, because of the armor. Because yeah, that would just be. I think that would look really, really cool on a mini. Like.
So yeah, fun story for me in that regard. I kind of got to do that because not only did we design Evil Dead 2 on this whole Heartthrob campaign twist, if you're familiar, Army of Darkness is owned by MGM and not Studio Canal. They're different rights holders, which means the two parts of the movie are completely separate licenses, or two parts of the franchise completely separate licenses, with no actual crossover in manufactured product. Except that Lynnvander actually did an Army of Darkness board game. We designed it before we did this whole Evil Dead project, and it sat in licensor approvals for a substantially long time. I think it is actually due to come out this year finally, so it's kind of weird that it's also going to happen. But just like Evil Dead, it is a game with a big game board that we illustrated. The castle is less of a coherent set than the cabin, so we have a little bit more freedom about what it looks like and how it's laid out. But we were able to, with that game also, it's the castle siege from the end of Army of Darkness, so it has lots and lots and lots of Deadite minions wearing armor and different kinds of weapons and stuff, because they are literally the Army of Darkness marching on the castle. So that game is actually fully cooperative. There is no traitor player. And it is almost a tower defense kind of style game. You're moving around the castle, trying to shore up the various walls, holding out long enough until Evil Ash steps on the field and you can defeat him. But again, just like with our Evil Dead 2 board game, it has a substantial box of plastic. I think actually Army of Darkness is two different boxes, though, if I recall. The starter set actually has the main game actually has cardboard standees for all the characters with illustrations on them. And then there's a separate box with all of the miniatures if you wanted to upgrade the game completely. We're able to split it in half. I think because there were so many miniatures, it made more sense to make them 2 SKUs. But I kind of got that already. I kind of actually did get to make the Evil Ash mini. And if memory serves, Dylan, I think we did this project right before you joined the company.
Yeah, so I was actually not part of that project.
You're like, you're like, can we do another expansion?
Did you film a playthrough video with us? I think that was one of the first things we did together. The game was done, and you helped us shoot a playthrough video for it.
Yes, yeah, that was actually done at Gen Con one year before I joined the team.
Yeah, man. It's so weird because I feel like you've been with the team forever, and yet we have projects that aren't published yet that you didn't design.
And you said that one is coming out later this year, finally, at some
I
point?
think there's the tentative date so it's being published by Dynamite Entertainment.
Oh,
They
yes,
hold
yes,
the comic rights for Army of Darkness. And they're working with MGM on it. I believe, last I heard, I think it's June this year.
I
But
think
But
this
the-
year is
said,
one of the...
we designed it, handed it off to them. They're doing all the last kind of minute tweaks and changes and everything, and basically handling the publisher duties for it. So it's, from our perspective, it's kind of done and dusted, like handed it off.
Okay.
Yeah, we have no insight into its production timeline.
Short of like emailing them and bothering them and asking them when it's coming.
Cool.
But I'm
Well,
sure you guys are really excited about it to finally...
Yeah, I think it'll be cool. It's certainly a weird small little world in licensing, and especially in the board game industry, where a lot of people in the industry know each other, and a lot of license holders know other license holders and publishers and designers. So it's a fairly tight-knit little community. It's just also kind of weird in the same way that Lynnvander got to work on both of the games that are in the same franchise, but through different publishers and different
companies.
licensors. Sometimes things work out this way.
That's awesome. I'm excited and happy for you guys.
Yeah, I don't know. Where can people pick up their copies of the Evil Dead 2 board game? Because like I'm especially with the single player mode, I'm probably gonna buy it. So where can people find it online to purchase?
So we still have it available for pre-order on our backer kit, because we're in manufacturing for the Evil Dead 2 Deluxe Edition right now, and that is what it's called. It will be, looks like so far we're still on track for shipping it. I think what were we saying, June or July? August is sort of our fulfillment window.
July, August is our goal.
Yeah, and we're still on track for that. We will probably have the game go to retail 2 months after that, so probably September, October is
Awesome.
what it looks like.
But if
I'm
you
actually
want
just
like the cool little add-ons, like those Necronomicon dice I was telling you about,
That's what
those
I was
aren't
gonna
going
ask
to
you
be
about.
in retail.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Only the deluxe edition box with all of the miniatures is going to be in retail. Everything else that we did on that campaign, if you don't pre-order it, will become a store exclusive, Lynnvander web store exclusive.
So
Just
people
because
will still
there's-
have a chance to get the dice and
Yeah,
whatnot.
they'll still be available, but like in fairly limited quantities. Part of what going into manufacturing now means is that we actually had to decide exactly how many of everything to make. So that's kind of all locked in now. I
Okay.
actually posted in the private chat. That's our pre-order link on Backer Kit. I don't know if you want to share that.
Yeah, I'll put that down in our description.
Sounds good.
Cool. Well, do you guys have anything else you would like to share with our viewers before we wrap this up? Any last little tidbits or anything?
I mean, I just want to say thanks for having us, because this
Of
is
course.
Absolutely.
this is a big thing for us, and we're very excited about it. And so you reaching out and us having the opportunity to spread the word about it is really exciting. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you
Of course.
guys for
Thank you
coming
for
on the
coming
show.
on. Yeah. And
I
personally,
always
I
enjoy
just want to
talking
say...
to.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Chris.
Sorry. No, you go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to say it's been a pleasure talking with people who are such big fans of the property. It's one of the things that I really enjoy about working on licensed games is talking to people who are very passionate about the franchises we work on. So, yeah, it's been super cool to talk to you guys. Thanks for having us.
And I was just going to say thank you for, the Heartthrob campaign, because I was one of those guys who, was part of the original Kickstarter, and then
I had a feeling.
was like, what happened? Yeah. And there's more stuff I'll tell you like after the show, but yeah, I was one of those guys that I was like, damn, it's just lost in the wind. There's no passage to read to go back and get it, but you guys, delivered on it for us, and I really, as a fan, I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for checking out this episode of Hail to the Deadites. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Let us know down in the comments if you'll be picking up the Evil Dead 2 board game and its pre-order, because that would be cool. Yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much, Josh and Dylan, for coming on the show. It means a lot to us, and we will definitely be supporting the game any way we can.
Yes.
Yeah, so cool. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I'm going to take it over to the outro now. Stay groovy.
Stay groovy.